Hey, everybody. Welcome back to week 4 in her shoes, following in the footsteps of Jesus with 4 women of faith. I'm Shannon with Salt and Clay, here with 4 women of faith, our teaching team for this study. And if you have been following along for the past 3 weeks, you know that we have been following in the last week of Jesus's life, but also looking at the lives of these women through Jesus's life and ministry. And this week, I am really excited as we wind up this final video teaching with Mary Magdalene. And we are going to see just how special that she was to the Lord and her love for him. And Helen is going to take it away and share with us about this special woman. So Helen, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Shannon. Well, I have to say it is a privilege to share with you about Mary Magdalene after the study I've done. But I have to make a confession. A couple of years ago, I would have had a prejudgment of Mary Magdalene because of incomplete information and based on not my own study. And so it was actually a blessing to be asked to study her. And I have to say, after seeing what the word does say about her, I've come to really appreciate and be inspired by Mary Magdalene. So before we go to the foot of the cross and then to the tomb where Mary Magdalene was, she's best known for those 2 chapters in John, where she is showing up at those 2 key spots. I want to go back a little bit and tell you 3 important things about her background. One is the fact that there is a controversy about her background, depending on which scholars and commentaries you want to read. There's a group that say she was a reformed prostitute, that was her background, her character identity before she met Jesus. And then there's another group that disagrees with that. And these are all big names too, that say, no, there is no concrete evidence that ties her to that background. So there's these 2 different opinions. And of course, we always hear, the most interesting one. And but the fact is, they all agree on one thing about Mary Magdalene's background, and that's because it's right in the Bible. And in Mark 16:8, it says that Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 demons. And so what we know, and what all of the people that have studied her agree with, is that she had been captive to darkness of evil spirits, that to just the passerby, she might have appeared extremely insane in her behavior at times, and that she was a tormented soul. A person that had this condition would have been ostracized from society and would have carried a lot of shame as a result. The Bible doesn't give us the details, and you just would love to have known how glorious it was the day that Mary met Jesus and he delivered her from this oppression. And just think, in other places in scripture where we have people with this problem who Jesus frees, we see that some of them had no control over their life at all. That they would throw themselves into fires, that they would yell out outlandish things, that they would, in some cases not be able to hear or see, but it was spiritually caused. Anyway, there could have been any number of things she would have experienced, but the fact is that Jesus changed all that when he delivered her. The thing that really impressed me about, so the first thing is there's a controversy. So if you want to study Mary Magdalene, you'll hear both sides of that. And the second thing is there is a truth, and she came from a place of darkness, not from maybe of her own making, but she had been in captivity and lived in darkness before Jesus delivered her. And the fact is, she didn't just stop there. She didn't just stop at being delivered. She went on to place her faith in Jesus to the point that she joined a group of women that followed Jesus and the disciples and took care of practical needs for them, so like food. Perhaps they made arrangements for them as they traveled. These were women that would have had to have their own money and freedom, because it says they supported the ministry from their resources. So that's an interesting thing to know about all of them, not just Mary. But these women, when you think of it, what an opportunity for them to be serving in the background, but yet be close enough to Jesus and the disciples to have seen and heard so much of Jesus' ministry. I can't imagine it was the best seat in the house. And they were humble. You don't hear them saying a word throughout that time that they traveled, but they took in all of the healings, they took in the deliverances, they saw miracles, and they heard the teaching. And they saw when things started to go bad for Jesus too. So they witnessed quite a bit. So what I realized when I started out was that I had compartmentalized Mary into this narrow box, and I couldn't figure out, how did she get to the foot of the cross? And so now I see it more clearly, that because of her transformation and her commitment to Jesus and serving, that she ended up at the foot of the cross in a very natural way, really. She was very committed for a while. So that is where we want to pick up in the scriptures that I studied, which were mainly John 19 and John 20, the time with Jesus at the cross and then at the tomb. Simply, Mary Magdalene was the only non-family woman who was there, because the other woman besides Mary, the mother, is probably Jesus' aunt or a relative. And so Mary was the only civilian, and except for John, of course, and he was the only disciple. But this little band of followers, I have to be so impressed with them. They witnessed parts of all of it, the trial, the mistreatment of Jesus, the going to the cross, and then finally the crucifixion and his death. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like for Mary, Jesus' mother, but for all of them that had placed their faith and all their hope in Jesus being the Messiah and being victorious. They were all expecting a victorious end. And so I can only imagine this must have been Mary's worst day. But I also wanted to point out, I was so impressed and inspired by their courage to stay there at the foot of the cross, because the disciples were in hiding and nowhere to be found. And so they knew what had happened to Jesus, and they had just gone away in hiding. And for these women and for John to be associated with someone dying a criminal's death and the shame of it all took a lot of courage, not to mention just the sheer cruelty that they had to witness. But as I thought about them here, just this is the most we can do for him now. This is what we can do. We can't do anything about this situation, feeling helpless, but yet we can do this. We can be here. And then I thought, sometimes being present for people is the biggest statement of all. If it's their worst time on earth in their life, and you're willing to just be there and be in solidarity with them and support of them, what a great quality. And of course, we see it in the others that were there as well. But I was impressed by that. So that was Friday. We're going to go into Sunday for the next scene, and that takes us to the empty tomb. Mary is coming with a small group of women. They're bringing spices and ointments to prepare Jesus' body for the final burial. And they are shocked when they see the stone moved away from the tomb. And when they look in, they do not see Jesus' body. I would love to have seen the expressions on their faces. You don't know whether it would have been joy, shock, horror, I mean, any number of um, not what they expected at all. And an angel was there and said, he is not here, he is risen. Go and tell the disciples. And so Mary runs, probably some of the other women ran to tell the disciples, specifically Peter and John, who run back to the tomb. Mary is back at the tomb, and they go into the tomb. Apparently, they've got to check out what these women are talking about, but they wanted to see for themselves the evidence that Jesus' body was not there. And we don't know what they're thinking. We just know that, they've come to corroborate the message. And then they leave. But Mary didn't leave. Mary stayed there. And I can only imagine she was distraught, that she was not knowing what her next step should be. But as she was there, she stooped down, she looked into the tomb again, and she saw two angels, all in white, one sitting where Jesus' head was, one sitting where his feet were. And that must have been an amazing thing right there. But it doesn't tell us much about her reaction. But what it does tell us is that the angels asked her why she's weeping. And she says something that shows that she has an agenda. She says, I'm weeping because they have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him. For her, this is the last act of devotion she can give, and she's determined to find that body. And she's maybe assuming the worst, grave robbers or whatever. So she tells them this. It says, now when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there and did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, woman, why are you weeping? Whom do you seek? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. I'm just thinking she really thought she could carry a whole body by herself. But anyway, this was her mission, and nothing was going to stop her. And she's experiencing a normal state of shock after you've had a trauma of a loss, and especially in that horrific way that she had witnessed. She is in shock and she isn't quite recognizing what's going on in front of her. She doesn't react to the presence of the angels, or at least we're not told. And she doesn't know it's Jesus that's been talking to her. But that's about to change. So that's where we're going now. And we're going to just finish this scene. And it's in John 20, 16 through 18. And I'm going to read this because there's so much in it, but it's really a pretty short passage. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him, Rabboni, which is to say, teacher. Jesus said to her, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. Mary came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and that he had spoken these things to her. And it just occurs to me that a lot happens after Jesus says her name. It's like she comes into full reality of what is right before her. And just like most of us, if we had been followers of Jesus in the flesh, we would have wanted to hug Jesus too. We thought we would never see him. However, he tells her not to hang on to him. And in reading this from the context, the only thing I came up with is that he wanted to give her an assignment. And he wanted to almost take her little face and look right in her little eyes and say, go and say this. And because the words are so specific, and John wrote the gospel, you think, well, that must have been the message she took, because that's the words John heard. So Mary immediately went from her being so overjoyed and just beside herself with happiness to, I now have the mission I really came here for, which Jesus himself had given to her. So I noticed that Jesus had no trouble putting his trust in Mary Magdalene to do this most esteemed thing, most honorable thing, not only to view him first in his resurrected state, but to also take that message to the disciples. And when you think of it, the word apostle means one who is sent. And some of the commentaries say that in that mission, Mary was acting as an apostle to the apostles, because Jesus didn't appear to all the men at once. He appeared to Mary Magdalene, and she was the messenger. And so I have to believe that those years of following Jesus, of serving Jesus, of hearing the word from him, of internalizing it, she was not an unknown person to him. He knew exactly who she was, and she cared enough to be there with only his mother, his aunt, and one disciple. And she was not going to be deterred from even showing devotion to him after he died. So he knew he was giving his assignment to the right person. And I think it's just awesome because he seems to delight, Jesus does in his ministry, to give privilege and to give blessing to people who other people would overlook, who other people might say, oh, well, not them, where they came from, or, he seems to delight in it. Well, I'm going to, turn the tables upside down. So I wanted to share one more thing, one more scripture in 1 John 3:8. It says, but the Son of Man came to destroy the works of the devil. So when Jesus died and rose again from the dead, he completed his work. And most of us think of it, well, of course, he died to save us from our sins, which he did. But the other things he came to do was to conquer death and to conquer Satan. So think of what a trophy in the flesh Mary Magdalene would have been, shining in all of her faithfulness and all of her courage and all of her devotion for Jesus, having been captive to those powers of darkness, but now was the first one to bear witness of that key component of the resurrection, which now is a central tenet of our faith. It's a central belief in our faith. Mary inspires and encourages me. She inspires me by her faithfulness, her service, and humility goes along with that. She never says a word. She's there serving. And her courage to show up, and her diligence to want to complete her commitment to him after he's gone. You just have to love it. In a way, she reminds me of Mary of Bethany and Mary and Martha of Bethany, because she's a woman of action, but she's a woman of such great devotion. So I'm encouraged by her. And mostly I'm encouraged what Jesus did for her, because he not only delivered her, he transformed her. And I think he wants to do both of those things for us. Regardless of what is in our past or what may be in our life right now, perhaps things we are still in bondage to, he wants to bring freedom to us as well as he did Mary. And he wants to transform our life just like he did hers. And if we will follow him, serve him, hear his word, believe his word, that transformation will happen. And the other thing that he inspires me about Mary Magdalene's life and how it turned out is that she thought she came with a certain purpose that was in her mind the best she could come up with, but he gave her an even more splendid purpose that she would always be remembered for, and that they're still recognizing today, every Easter. And so these are the things that I love about Mary Magdalene, and I would love to have known her, and maybe someday I'll get to have coffee with her and ask her all about what it was like to follow in that ministry to Jesus and the disciples. But I believe that's what built her, and that Jesus' power to transform just changed her into a different person.
Mm. Oh gosh, Helen, that was so, so good. I love all of these riches that you are unearthing about her. And I mean, I'm thinking about her identity, being misunderstood. And I love when you talked about the assignment that the Lord gave her, because the Lord didn't have to, he could show up anywhere, right? He didn't have to show up there. He could have went ahead where the disciples were, because he did go there later, right, in the day.
He did.
But there he chose to be. And I just, isn't that the Lord? Like anyone who is an underdog, or if who is misunderstood or whatever, when they are given their lives to him, like you said, he transforms them into a new person. And even if no one else sees it, he sees it and honors it. So grateful for that.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, when you think they had just been fighting in the upper room about who would be the greatest, the last time Jesus was spending with them. And I'm sure if you would have asked them, who's the likely candidate to get this job? Of course, they would have been fighting over it. But Jesus had a better plan.
Like when you were talking about just devotion, I love thinking of Mary as like she was determined to show devotion to the Lord, and how faithful in that scene where he shows up there, and like you're saying, he could have shown up anywhere, but he's so faithful in rewarding our faith, right? I think that's beautiful. She was determined to show devotion, and he was faithful to reward that. And so good.
It is.
Yeah, I think about Mary's past, like you talked about, and I mean, even now, how many years later, there's still so much controversy about who she was or who she wasn't.
Right.
And she definitely had to overcome some stigma in her time, whatever that may have been a result of. And just to think that that did not disqualify her from the Lord using her, and that didn't disqualify her from even being part of his ministry, that her life had so much purpose because of what Jesus did for her. And just to take that for ourselves, like you said, like things that we may have been delivered from, or things that we are even still struggling with now, to know that that doesn't disqualify us from being used by God. And that it's not even in spite of those things, but it's because of those things that he chooses us, because he will get the glory in the end. So
absolutely, that's such a great point.
Well, and how many times, ladies, do we hear in our head, you're not qualified to do that.
Yeah,
you're not qualified to do that. And I love, just even what you said, Helen, she's been transformed and she's been delivered. And, just even to say, when those things come into our mind, especially to things that we feel called to do that might feel too big, or someone's better at it, or, the Lord has transformed me and he has qualified me to be able to say that. I mean, it's so huge, and that the Lord honors that too.
yeah. I was thinking similarly, how when he does appear to her, and she has been so faithful to him, but how sometimes he qualifies the unqualified because we're just willing to say yes. And you just see her constantly, and even I mean, he could have transformed her life, delivered her, but she wasn't ashamed to continue to follow him. Like, oh, well, I have a shady past, I probably don't deserve to be with you. She did the opposite, where she followed him, she served him, she was with him till the end. And it speaks to me, because I don't know if I had that kind of past, if I would feel qualified or worthy to be seen with him, or to still continue to be around him. And so it's something that even speaks to me now, that it's nothing that we do. He just loves us, and that he he qualifies us himself. So just what you're saying, Shannon, and yeah, that was really interesting to me, that she felt like she could be there till the end.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to think there was something about the way Jesus was in conversation with people, because you see such amazing things happen in other times too. The woman caught in adultery, uh, going to eat at the tax collector's house. And, I just believe Jesus was an unbelievable communicator, but that there was something about probably the way he looked at people with love that was so healing. And it may have been the big factor, so Mary felt safe to join this group that traveled. And also, I think after looking at what I found about her is that I probably come down on the side that I don't think she was a prostitute. I think she was terribly demon possessed or demon oppressed. But regardless of whether she was or she wasn't, the past of having that kind of spiritual problem would have been a disgraceful thing for most of the society back then. And you'd want to cut a wide berth, around that condition. And I've got to believe that just Jesus' ability to deliver and to communicate love and safety must have been really a healing thing for her.
I think about her, if just like you said, Helen, you don't have a lot of conversations, but you wonder, after he delivered her, it must have just been such acceptance and giving her, this is your identity, daughter, in me now. And just, it was, reaffirmed. And so she believed that identity. And I just can't imagine when she's at the foot of the cross, knowing that this is the Son of God. She knows his identity, but yet he's being labeled as a criminal. And now the tables have turned. Like he shows me when I was in a pit and in darkness, and now his identity is being completely misrepresented. And I could just see, I am not leaving this side. I will not leave him, because he never left me, not once.
Yeah, he came to me in my darkness. I'm not going to leave in his.
Yeah.
And it's something that I really have to say I love about women, period, is that I believe in general, many women feel, they're not going to let their friends suffer by themselves. They're not going to just stand by if there's something they can do. And I really think that that's just one of the most wonderful qualities about women in general. But Mary Magdalene, had all this past. And I do think that was going through her mind. How can the one that freed me, that transformed me, now be suffering this? And believing as she did. So then the fact that she continued to want to go and pay respect to him after his death, well, I'm not done. I'm at least going to do this. And she's got grit.
I love something you said, just her being at the foot of the cross. You saying that, the disciples fled and the women were there. And I have been reading through Job, and so I'm in the midst of the miserable comforters. And when you said, when someone is suffering and you really don't know what else to do, the best thing to do is just to be there. And I felt like I really took that personally, because I always feel inadequate when someone is suffering. Like what do I do? What do I do for them? And what a simple but profound thing to know that just being there is the best thing in most cases. And so I just love that. I think that's huge. just to even take on a personal level
Mm.
with people in our lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Amber and Helen, regarding that. And just to think, like you said, about what it must have been to even witness that. Like it would be, like you said, traumatizing.
Oh,
And for ourselves, like, are we willing to walk through hard seasons with people and maybe walk through some really ugly stuff with them and not turn away and not run away and not hide?
Right.
Yeah, that's also something we can definitely glean from her.
Yeah.
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 And I think kind of along with Bethany saying, are we willing to be with Jesus at all costs? You know, in not just in suffering, but in anything, you know, that was potentially a dangerous thing for her to do. And
Mhm.
are we willing to do that is a question for myself for sure. But yeah.
Very challenging.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But definitely something to pray about. I love that you said that, because I mean, we are in challenging times, and as the birth pains go, it will continue to be so. And just having that as our prayer every day of like, you know, where can I show that devotion? Where can I be there for you, Jesus, no matter the cost? And yeah, I just want that to be the prayer of my own heart as well, and be willing.
Right.
I just see her, you know, Helen, you had said there's not a lot where we see her talking that much, right? There's just a couple of places, but yet what we do see is she's always with Jesus. She's in his company and she's seeking after him.
Mm-hmm.
And just the faithfulness of that through difficulty, no matter what people might think,
Mm-hmm.
to stand up with him.
Mm-hmm.
And to just keep just going in the hard times and the good times and the times when we're confused, when we don't understand, when things are unraveling, that would be us. Like when they see us, that she just was always in his presence. She was always seeking after him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good takeaway for me, is just,
Even when you don't understand, the circumstances, and it doesn't seem to make sense according to what you think God is doing, just doesn't fit the script. And you know, both she and Mary, one thing I was really touched by also is that she was a person who obeyed. You know, she didn't lose any time taking care of her assignment, and she didn't lose any time getting to the tomb. And she was not just a believer, she was a doer of her faith. And I really respect that. Years ago, we knew a widow who felt called to take care of a person who had been in the ministry but had fallen into some bad life patterns and was dying from AIDS. And the churches, it was difficult for him to move in those circles anymore. And she would go into his home and cook and take care of him. And I just remember saying, you know, this woman is the real deal, because there's nobody going, you know, it's just all for real. And I believe that's the kind of person Mary was, you know, that she could endure, you know, people casting aspersions, people misunderstanding, and she could endure even danger. I don't know, she just seemed to have a grit. And part of it was the fruit of the Spirit, I'm sure, but I believe that she was so gloriously delivered that, you know, this was her new life. I mean, this meant the world to her, and Jesus meant the world to her.
I love that scene, Helen, of her just at the tomb, and she's in sheer shock. The angels are there, and she comes out, and she hears Jesus say her name, and she just snaps out of that shock, right? And his
Yes.
voice just like cuts through, and we're talking about her just being delivered, and I could just imagine like his voice meant everything, right? Like his word meant everything.
Everything.
Right. And just even in our own lives, like when we first were saved, like his voice calling our name is everything, you know? And I just think of on a daily basis that his voice is what should just snap us out of our shock of whatever it is that we're going through or what we're overwhelmed by. And I just think that's such a powerful thing to think on, that even today we have that with Jesus, that his voice can cut through whatever it is we're going through. And
I know that it seems like sometimes we're having our devotions and we're just going along and we're following Jesus as, in our normal practice. And somehow we hear him saying our name in regards to some scripture or some, prayer issue. And it really makes a difference. I mean, you definitely respond because it's become personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, ladies, this has been such a great discussion. I mean, my mind is still filled with so many thoughts. I mean, just the fact, I love that when we are seeking after him, even just with her, she just did the next thing. She just did what she thought should be done, right? And she just kept after it and kept after it, and then was given the specific assignment. And I love that, Amber, when you said, then he said her name and she snaps out. And I think that's such a great reminder, because he calls each of us by name in that place. And so I just have loved looking at each and every one of these women. You ladies have brought out such insights and depth. I've loved our conversation. This has been just such a blessing. And I'm kind of sad. This is our last video teaching, but it's not the end of the study. There is actually one more, week 5, and it's really a reflection. So encourage you, after you get through Mary Magdalene, you will have a few more questions that you can sit and ponder and reflect on as it leads up to Easter. So we have just loved this opportunity. Thank you, Helen, for writing this study. Thank you, ladies, for just really bringing even more just depth and richness to each of these women. I feel like I've gained so much more insight into these women than I think I would have ever had just studying out my own. So thank you for that. And just so grateful to the Lord that he has just put this together. So we want to thank you for being a part of this. We pray that this has blessed you, that you have been able to really put yourself in the shoes of each of these women of faith, and that you know that he sees you, that he has an assignment for you, that he is calling you, and that he has redeemed you and transformed you and has qualified you for what it is that he's calling you to do. So just pray blessings over you. I pray you have just a fabulous Easter. And until next time, we will see you then. Take care. Thank you, ladies.
Okay. Bye-bye.